I was a young HR manager at that point, in my mid to late 20s, working still in manufacturing at that particular moment. And I was doing my job when all of a sudden I heard a knock on the door. I looked up, and in my office, a young man standing in the door. I want to say young man, he was about the same age as me, but we were both young at that point. And he immediately became apologetic. Phil, I'm so sorry to interrupt. No, come on in, sit down. Well, Phil, no, I'm not going to sit down. I'm only be here for just a minute. I have a simple question to ask you. Sure, what's the question? He said, Phil, have you all made a decision on that scheduler's position yet? Now, don't get hung up on the term scheduler's position, even though I would imagine all of you understand the concept of a scheduler in a manufacturing environment. But really what you need to know was the question he was asking was about a job opening. In our company at that particular moment in time, when we had an opening, we would post the openings on the board in the break room. Everybody knows then what openings are there. If you're interested in signing up, you can come sign up, and you would at least get an interview. We don't guarantee you'll get hired or promoted, but at least you'll have an interview. Everybody deserves to be heard. So about 3 weeks earlier, there had been an opening, a scheduler's position that had come open in our company. I had posted the job opening on the board in the break room, and a number of people, including this young man, had signed up to be considered. In the 3 weeks that had passed, we had taken the posting down, and we had done all of the interviews for all the people that had signed the listing. Now the young man is just curious. He's just anxious. He wants to know what's going on, and thus his question again, have you all made a decision regarding that scheduler's position? The honest answer. The honest answer to that simple, straightforward question would have been, should have been, yes, we have, you're not it. Simple as that. That's what I should have said, but you already know that's not what I said. So what did I say? Phil, have you all made a decision about that scheduler's position? It kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting him to ask the question. And in that moment, this is what I said. I said, no, we haven't made a decision on that position yet. Lie number one. We expect to make a decision within the next couple of weeks. Lie number two, we've already made the decision. And when we do make a decision, you'll be what? First to know, lie number three. Have you all realized after you tell that first lie how quickly the second and third and others come and fall in line? What did the young man say? Bill, I understand. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is. Thank you. I don't mean to bother you. I just want you to know it's in my mind. So if others can wait, I can wait too. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate you so much. And with that, he reversed field and out of my office he went. I wish I could tell you that as soon as he had left my office, I was immediately racked with guilt and remorse for these lies that I had just told. I wish I could tell you that. I don't remember that at all. All I remember is thinking, well, that wasn't too bad. Maybe none of the problems I experience today are going to be bad. We'll just keep moving forward. But isn't it interesting how life has a way of reckoning things? You may think this is an exaggeration. It's not. On that very day, later that day, we had scheduled a quarterly plant-wide meeting. Happened 4 times a year. We bring all 400 employees into a room. You know how it is. The plant manager would get up on a stage like I am in front of 400 faces, and he would give an update. Here's what the sales look like. Here's what the safety record looks like. Here's what the quality record looks like. You know, he would go through and give them metrics of the business, keeping people informed. And then after 5, 10, 15 minutes of that, he would look at his watch and go, well, we got about 5 more minutes. Does anybody have any questions? That day, there were 2 people standing in the room. Everybody else was seated. The plant manager was standing, and I was standing over here to this side of the room next to the door. Why was I standing? Because I was the gopher. The HR manager, the gopher, hey, Phil, can you go check? Phil, can you go look? Phil, can you go get this? So I just determined long before that it's easier to be up than it is to distract by climbing over people. So when he looked at his watch and he said, we got about 5 minutes. Anybody have any questions? Immediately, a hand shoots up right here on the front row. Art, our plant manager, calls on him. Yeah, what's your question? He said, have y'all made a decision on that scheduler's position yet? Now, it's important to know, this is not the young man that I had spoken with earlier in the day. This is another of the candidates. The young man I've spoken with earlier in the day is out in the audience, and I know he's punching the guy next to him. I can answer this question. I talked to Phil myself. They haven't made it. They're making it in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be the first to know. So can you even begin to imagine even a little bit of what I felt that particular day when I heard my plant manager say these words? Yeah, we did make a decision. Made that decision about 2 weeks ago. And then he turns to me and he says, Phil, I don't see any reason why we can't go ahead and announce it here. Everybody's here. We might as well announce it here. Don't you think that would be the thing to do, Phil? Yeah, Art, whatever you say. I had almost 399 people in the room had no idea what was going on, including Art, my boss. But there were two of us that knew. Two of us that knew. Most of the eyes were focused on the front of the room where Art was standing, but one set of eyes was focused on me and me on him. Do you believe eyes can speak? Because his eyes were speaking to me. You lied to me. My eyes were speaking to him. I'm sorry. 5 minutes later, the meeting is over. Everybody was headed out of the room except me. I'm swimming upstream. I've got some fence building to do. And I found the young man. I'll never forget this conversation. He was standing there in front of me. He was taller than me, and I was looking up to him, which I now see as being some way appropriate. He was looking down on me, which I also think that was appropriate. And I was trying to explain, look, I am so sorry. I know what I said was not right, and I'm so sorry. You caught me off guard. You need to understand. And he stood here just like this. He never uttered a word, not one word. He arms crossed. He just looked at me as I was trying to dig myself out of this hole. Finally, it seemed like forever. I know it was only a few seconds or a minute or so, but finally I didn't have anything else to say. I began to repeat myself. And I simply said to him, I hope you understand. It was only then that he uncrossed his arms and he turned, still hasn't said a word, but turned to walk away. He took about a step and then turned and looked back at me and he said one word that haunts me still. Whatever. And turned and walked away. That simple word, whatever. I can't tell you exactly what he intended by that word. I just know I heard the word. What I think he intended by the word, obviously, Phil, you'll tell a person whatever is convenient in the moment for you, whether it's true or not. Whatever you think they want to hear. Whatever will get you to where you want to be without regard for the feelings and the impressions left on others. I went back to my office that day, and I had a heart-to-heart with myself. It was a miserable few minutes, because that's not who I wanted to be, and that's not who I had been up until that moment. And I had to make some really tough decisions. And one of the decisions I made was I am never going to lie to an employee again. Period. Now, you know that doesn't mean I can tell them everything they want when they want to know it. Sometimes I have to look people in the eye and go, I know, but I can't tell you. I know, but it's not time to share that yet. I know, but you're just going to have to trust me on this one. When I can tell you, I will, but I'm not going to lie to them. There's just too much riding on this relationship. One of the best things that's happened to me over the last 40 years of my life and career is that I've been able to see people, including this young man, who saw clearly the role of a leader more so than even I saw in the moment. I grew up in a little farming community outside of Princeton by the name of Farmersville, Kentucky. That ought to tell you something. My grandmother, who was a wonderful lady, her name was Phillip Van Hooser, my father's mother, was the consummate country grandmother. And when I say consummate country grandmother, I want you to know I'm not exaggerating. In all of her life, I never saw her in anything but a dress or a skirt, certainly never pants or shorts or a bathing suit. Her dress was always very plain. Her hair was always pulled up in a bun and always had a net on her head. She wore an apron. In that apron always was two pockets. The left-hand pocket, she always had a handkerchief. She believed that you could conquer the world with a handkerchief. In the right-hand pocket, a can of snuff, okay? My grandmother dipped a little snuff, okay? But that's my grandmother. She cooked on a wood stove until the day she died, and she died in April 1974. She never had indoor plumbing her entire life in over 80 years on this planet. And I want you to know something. I love that woman so much. So much. And I relished the opportunity to be with my grandmother, to be in her home, to watch her do what she did. And she loved her grandchildren, not just me, but my cousins and brothers and sisters as well. And I remember one particular occasion that has been very, very instrumental as I talked to leaders and managers over the years. And it happened on an occasion when I was about 5 or 6 years old, best I can remember, but I remember the occasion exceptionally well. I was at her house and she was making homemade biscuits. Now, this was not unusual. She did it almost every day of her life. It's just that I had the opportunity to be there on that particular day. She had flour on her apron and her dress, and she was rolling things out, and she was shuffling around the kitchen. And this may come as a big surprise to you. Even as a little kid, I like to talk. And therefore, as my grandmother was doing what she was doing, I was right on her heels, and I was just talk. I bet she didn't say 5 words in 20 minutes. She didn't have to. I was doing all the talking for both of us. Anyway, as she finished up one activity with the biscuits, she stopped, and I remember so well, she just kind of wiped her hands and rubbed them on her apron, and then she bent over and she said, "Son, come here. Come here." And I thought, oh, this is great. This is great. I'm going to have my grandmother's undivided attention. And I did. I did have her undivided attention because when I went to her, I walked and she put her hands on my shoulders. Now, I don't know if you've been around elderly folks lately or not, but sometimes they need someone to brace, to steady themselves a little bit. And I thought that's exactly what she was doing. But then it didn't take very much time to realize that's not what she was doing at all, because I felt the pressure on the shoulders, and my grandmother proceeded to get down on her knee. Now, the dynamic had changed. She's still holding my shoulders, but now what's happened? We, for the first time that I could ever remember, were on the same level. Looking eyeball to eyeball, communicating one-on-one in very close proximity. And again, I loved it. Even at that early stage, I knew something was special about this. This is something I need to remember, something that I don't ever want to forget. And so I guess I was even tuned in more than I normally would have. So as she held my shoulders, looked in my eyes, she said something that day that I have never forgotten. She said, "Shut up!" Now, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. And I remember I recoiled. You would have too. When she screamed those words, I recoiled, but her grip tightened. And in fact, she pulled me to herself. And as she pulled me to herself, she wrapped her arms around me so tightly that in my mind's eye, I can still see and feel the compression. And when she had me totally immobilized, she whispered these words in my ear. She said, "Son, you need to realize that when you're talking, you never learn anything. It's only when you're willing to shut up and listen that you might just learn something." You are working with men and women who have dedicated themselves to your industry and in many cases your business. And yet, are we giving them the time and attention that's appropriate and necessary for us to learn as much from them as we wish for them to learn from us? I knew that I was a young HR manager. Probably in my mid-20s, 26, 27 years old. I don't remember exactly, but that was the basic range. I was working in my office one day, and all of a sudden an employee, I'll call him John. John came into my office. Now, before I go any further, let me explain something to you. I did not like John. As far as I was concerned, there was a lot not to like about John. And I also wanted you to know that I felt like I was in a superior position to John, not because I was older or smarter, but because I was in a managerial role while he was in a laborer role. Nevertheless, John comes into my office that day and he dumped a problem in my lap. It really makes no difference what the problem was. Let me simply say to you that it was a problem of his own making, and yet he was trying to turn it over to me so that he would not have any responsibility afforded it. And I don't know about you, but it was one of those days where it was just sort of the perfect storm. My attitude, the timing, the circumstance, the person, they all kind of came together, and I decided to do something that I've never done before. Before that date, I'd never done this, and I will tell you, I've never done it since. The one time in my life I've done this thing. I decided I'm going to tell John exactly what I think of John. That's right. Some of you have said, I think I'll tell, or I think I'll give him a piece of my mind. I'm going to tell you, not only did I think I'm going to tell John, I told John exactly what I thought of him. You know what John did? He told me what he thought of me. I wasn't expecting that. Hold on, you can't do that. I'm the boss here. But one of the things I learned that day, and it was a valuable lesson as difficult as it was, when you attack someone personally, you can always expect a defensive counterattack. Now, it may be a frontal attack. They may come right back at you, or it may be an attack from behind, but they will always try to get even. And John told me what he thought of me. And in that moment, we both flared. Now, I'll quickly tell you, there was nothing physical about this confrontation. He didn't lay a hand on me, I didn't lay a hand on him. But I would argue this many years later, thinking back on it, that the scars that we created with our tongues in that 3 or 4 minute time period are probably longer lasting than anything we could have done with our fists in that same length of time. And then it was over almost as quickly as it started. He left my office, he slammed the door, window reverberated in my door. I mean, I didn't care, I was as mad as he was. And here's the thing about working in a manufacturing facility that I think all of you can relate to. There's no question my boss is going to hear about this. The only question is, when? And that question was answered about 15 minutes later. I get a telephone call from my boss, and it basically was this: hey, Phil, just come on over to my office. I've got a couple things I need to talk to you about. Click. Did I know? I was absolutely certain. I knew exactly what it was going to be about. And immediately I flared again. I'm not going to take any of his crap. He thinks he's going to jump on me. I was looking for a job when I found this one. I had, as my kids sometimes used to say, an attitude. And with that attitude, I walked across the hall, and this is the last thought I had before I went into my boss's office. I'm not saying a word. He called the meeting, he can talk. I'm going to get out here as quickly as I possibly can. I walked in, he told me to sit down. I sat down across the desk from him. He could immediately tell my attitude was not right. But he asked me a simple question. In fact, it was in the form of a statement. These are the words he said, the exact words he said, and to the best I can remember, this is the way he delivered the words from a tone standpoint. He said, Phil, I understand you had a little bit of a problem a while ago. Almost a lilt in his voice. Phil, I understand you had a little bit of a problem a while ago. My one-word response, yeah. As in, come on. I didn't say the come on, that was implied. Now, he could have stopped the meeting, the conversation, the proceeding right there and said, look, you're not going to talk to me that way. But if he had have done that, my anger was at such a point that it would have exploded. Jerry had a better idea, and Jerry had more self-control. Jerry picked up a pad of paper and he started writing, completely silent, never saying a word, just writing on the pad of paper. I, on the other hand, just sat back. Remember, I wasn't going to say anything else. When he finished writing on the pad of paper, he put the pad of paper down on the desk, turned it toward me, and slid it across his desk. He didn't say anything, but it was obvious he wanted me to pick it up and read it, and I did. I picked it up and read it. There were 5 words written on the pad of paper. The 5 words were these: when you lose your temper. When you lose your temper. I read it 2 or 3 times. I mean, it didn't take long. I didn't know what he was talking about, and I still wasn't inclined to respond. I just put the pad of paper on the desk, slid it back to him, thinking to myself, you want to talk, big boy? You can talk. He picked this pad of paper up, started writing again. This time did not take nearly as long. Puts the pad of paper, slides it back to me. When I pick it up, I realize he's erased 3 words. 2 words remained. He had erased the words and left illuminated the 2 words, you lose. And that's when he started talking. He said, you lose, boy. He said, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but in less than 5 minutes, you were able to lose credibility, integrity, and professionalism. He said, Phil, I don't know if you've thought about this or not, but there are a number of people around who will be in my office before the day is over saying, Phil should go. He's abused the position, the trust that you've put him in. He should go. He's too young. He should have never been in that position in the first place. He said, but I have repeatedly defended you by saying, don't judge him on his age, judge him on his accomplishment, his execution. Until today. He said, Phil, do you have any idea what John is doing right now? I was so self-absorbed that once John left my office, I hadn't thought about John again. I was too busy thinking about Phil. The only other words I spoke in the meeting, no, I don't. He said, well, let me tell you what John is doing right now. John is in the break room, or John is in the employee dressing room, or John's out in the parking lot. I don't know where John is, but wherever he is, he's surrounded by employees right now who are saying, man, you got to old Phil a while ago. We heard about it. Tell us about it. How'd you do it? We might like to try. He said, yeah, there'll be those that try you from this point forward, Phil, because you've already proven yourself to be vulnerable. He said, Phil, you need to know that I'm not going to fire you, despite the wishes of others. I'm not going to fire you. And then he went on to say, I'm not going to discipline you in any way. And then he hit me with this one. He said, after all, what is it that I could do to you that's worse than what you've already done to yourself? He said, I'm not going to fire you. I'm not going to discipline you. He said, but I'm also not going to help you. I've told you what the problem is. You already knew it, but now I've made it very clear. If you fix this situation, he said, you're the only one that can do it. Now, if you don't fix it, next time, the consequences will be grave. But you got a chance to fix the problem. I went back across the hallway to my office, and I felt about as low as I'd ever felt in my life, but within about 10 or 15 minutes, I made myself a promise. And it's a promise that I've kept to this very day. You can believe that or not. I can't make you believe it, but it's still the truth. I promised myself that I would never lose my temper in public ever again. Does that mean I've never been mad? Of course not. I've been angry many, many times, but you won't know it. And those that come in contact with me professionally won't know it. Why? Because I have too much to lose.